I love children's books. I loved them when I was a child, as a teenager, and even as an adult. There are quite a few picture books I've been captivated by, but no illustrator has captured my heart like Maurice Sendak. Today, I'll share my small collection of Maurice Sendak books with you and tell you a little about the author. Hi there, I'm Linda Maxey, the author of the Library Lynn Guides to Superlative Nonfiction. For those new to my channel, I'm a retired librarian. During my career, I spent time working as a children's librarian in both public libraries and in school libraries. So I experienced the books I'm going to share with you today as a child, as a parent, and as a librarian, reading aloud to children who were not my own. Maurice Sendak was an American-born son of Polish immigrants. He grew up in Brooklyn, New York. He attended the Art Students League in New York, which is run by and for art students, and that was the extent of his formal education. During his lifetime, he illustrated over 80 children's books. I believe it would be fair to say that he's best known for Where the Wild Things Are. I discovered that book when I was in first grade, and as for many children, it quickly became one of my favorites. I love the story, of course. Who can't relate to Max? But it was the illustrations that captured me the most. I have a paperback copy of this book that I bought for my sons when they were small. The book was originally published in 1963. The illustrations of the wild things were so comforting for me as a child. Even though they were scary, I guess you could say scary, maybe to a child, the fact that the monsters were afraid of Max made them a lot less formidable. Somehow the book assured me that my own wild feelings and not so nice impulses didn't make me less okay or less lovable. When I read this book to elementary school students, we would first enjoy the story in its entirety. Then we would all practice becoming wild things. We would roll our terrible eyes and gnash our terrible teeth, show our terrible claws, and then we would put on music and have a small, contained, wild rumpus. I would urge them to stomp and roar, and occasionally I had to discourage a few overzealous ones from climbing up the bookshelves, but I think we all enjoyed it. We all need an outlet, and we need to remember that children need outlets too. I watched a Bill Moyers interview with Sendak, and he said that he based the wild things on his Jewish relatives, his extended family. Those were his words, not mine. But I do think most children are a bit horrified by their older, less familiar relatives. I mean, they are always running up wanting to pinch your cheeks or give you a hug or get a kiss, and if you don't know them very well, it can be a little bit overpowering. Before he wrote this book, he had a decade of illustrating books for other authors, and he published his first set of his own books the year before Where the Wild Things came out. In 1962, Harper & Row published his Nutshell Library. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to show some other pictures later. It is just adorable. I first discovered this when I was on an overnight visit with my friend Laura from high school, spending the night, we called it. The first time I visited Laura, I saw this adorable little set of books inside a cabinet in her room. I wanted to look at them, and she thought I was crazy. "They're just some books somebody gave me when I was little," she said. But I was completely captivated. I could have looked at them all night, and I'm not being sarcastic about that. I was truly captivated by these books. It wasn't until my first son was born that I decided to actually buy a set, and both my boys enjoyed these books very much. But I don't think they enjoyed them any more than I did. The 4 little books included in this set are Chicken Soup with Rice, in which the hero goes through the season enjoying chicken soup in zany ways every month of the year. In One Was Johnny, we find a counting book, and all small children need one. In Alligators All Around, we have an alphabet book where the alligators enjoy everything from A to Z. And finally, in Pierre, we learn of young Pierre who doesn't care about anything, which naturally leads to a lot of trouble. And that story is told in 5 chapters with a prologue, and it even has a moral at the end. In getting ready for this video, I pulled these small books out of their slipcases to read them, and they still make me smile. Another book of Sendak's that I discovered and loved in first grade school started for me in first grade. Back then, you didn't have to go to kindergarten, and I didn't get to go. But another book of his that I discovered in first grade was Mr. Rabbit and the Lovely Present. Now, Sendak didn't write this story. That was Charlotte Zolito. But Sendak did the illustrations, and the illustrations were what I loved most about the book. It's another Harper and Row book, which was published in the year I was born in 1962. The little girl in the story is never named. She's just called the little girl, and she wants to get a nice present for her mother, but she has no idea what to get. So she goes to her friend, Mr. Rabbit, and Mr. Rabbit takes all kinds of time helping her figure out what to get her mother. It's all based on colors. As a 6-year-old, it made me think there was a magical place somewhere in the world where everything was beautiful. And because of the book, I knew that that place was there, and that one day I would find it. Now, I haven't found it yet, but I'm no less certain that it exists and that one day I will find it. And I still think this book is absolutely captivating. In an interview conducted in his apartment in 1966, it's the second interview I've linked below, Sendak says that the illustrations for this book were based on Winslow Homer's. The next book is Let's Be Enemies, and I bought this one for my sons. By the time he did this book, Sendak had already developed his trademark style, and you can recognize it in the front cover. The book is by Janice May Udry, and it was published by HarperCollins in 1961. I think most children can relate to this one as well. Maybe even adults can relate to it. John and James are very best friends. They do everything together, but then one afternoon, John decides that James always wants to be boss. After that revelation, he decides they are no longer friends. From now on, they will be enemies. And don't we all, even as adults, have things like that happen occasionally? Do they stay enemies forever? Try to find a copy of this charming book to find out. The next one is one my son absolutely loved, and I think most children love, the Little Bear books. The stories, once again, are not by Sendak. These books were written by Elsie Holland Minierick. I think I'm saying that right. I may not be. They were published as a series in the 1950s and 60s. The edition I have is an I Can Read book for emerging readers, and it was published by Harper and Row in 1957. There are 4 short chapters. What will Little Bear wear? Little Bear goes to the moon. Birthday soup. And Little Bear's Wish. These books are absolutely charming. While my children were little, the television series began, but we didn't have cable TV, so I don't know if either of my sons ever got to watch it, maybe at a neighbor's house or a friend's house. But we had this book, and we checked out the others from the series at the library to read out loud. They're about the everyday adventures of a little bear and his loving parents and friends. Sendak's illustrations are the perfect accompaniment. They live in a small, clean, neat cottage, and Little Bear's life, though quiet, is full of imaginary adventure. If you haven't read them and you have a child in your life, I absolutely recommend them. And finally, I bought my brother's book, which was published after Sendak passed away. In the Bill Moyers interview linked below, Sendak talks about his childhood. His parents were immigrants who struggled with English. His father was seldom at home, and he worked hard to provide for the family. Sendak didn't say much about his mother. He just said that she had problems, and she probably took her problems out on her children. Sendak was the youngest of 3. He had an older brother, Jack, and an older sister. They were much older than Sendak, and he really considers them more his parents than his real parents because they were the ones who were good to him. This poem was written for his brother Jack and also for his longtime partner of 50 years, Eugene Glenn. And Sendak was also writing it for himself. I don't pretend to understand this poem. I've read it several times. I really don't understand it, but the illustrations do remind me of William Blake's, and that's another artist that Sendak said was an influence on him in some of the interviews I watched. In my book, Library Lynn's curated collection of superlative nonfiction, there's a book about Sendak and his work, The Art of Maurice Sendak by Selma G. Lanes. For many other great nonfiction books, I've linked those books and my second book, Library Lynn's biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs in the description box below. So that's it for me today. Do you have a favorite Maurice Sendak work to share? Or do you have another children's book illustrator that you really love? If you do, leave a comment below. And until next time, happy reading.